Hi everyone, Ken here from Whittling Woods. Going to do a quick little video here on getting started whittling today, essentially. A quick way to get started, simple supplies that you'll need, and you can basically determine whether or not you're even interested in doing the hobby without spending a whole heck of a lot of money. First, let's look at the wood. This is basically a one buy from one of the big box stores. It's made out of pine. It's very soft. It's pretty easy to cut. I wouldn't recommend it for regular whittling, but it's good enough to use to play around with. You're going to take that piece of pine. I like to split it down the middle. You draw a center line, and essentially what I do is I take a handsaw. I'll just cut it down the middle to create basically a square piece of wood. When you're done, you'll wind up with two pieces that you can play around with. You can see one here, just kind of quick little sketch whittles type of thing to play around with and to just to develop some ideas. Basically, what you want to do is wind up with a piece similar to this. It's essentially a square piece of wood. You're dealing with a piece that's approximately 3/4 by 3/4. Again, this is a one by. So pick yourself up a decent straight piece. Make sure there's no knots or flaws in the wood. Straighter, hopefully not too warped. You can split it down the middle with just a regular handsaw. Doesn't take much, and wind up with a 3/4 by 3/4 piece that you can start playing around with. Next thing, what you'll need is some type of knife. The simplest solution would be either going with a fixed blade box cutter knife like this. This is the Stanley 199. I've done a number of videos. You've seen me use this. It's a good knife to use. You can find blades all over the place. I use these Lennox gold blades. I have a couple of videos on getting this knife ready to go. Put it in there, and you'll have to prep it. We'll go over that real fast too. But you're gonna have to do that with most knives that you buy. So that's one solution. Typically, you can find these at some of the big box stores. I wouldn't use the folding knives, the kind that they sell that basically you can open and close. It's safer to use the fixed blade like this. It's for getting potentially cut, the blade shutting on you, you're better off using a fixed blade like this. It's sturdier and it's safer for whittling. The other option is to find yourself a relatively inexpensive pocket knife. Again, I've done videos using pocket knives. This is one I picked up quite a ways ago. It's one of the Rough Rider knives. It was very inexpensive at the time. I think it was only like $7 or so. I think now they're maybe $14 or whatever. It's not too expensive. The other option is a standard Swiss Army knife. It's a decent knife to use. Get one that feels comfortable. Don't get the big one that has all the attachments. The fewer attachments, the better. And these I know they sell at most places as well. So you can pick either one of these type of pocket knives up for relatively inexpensive. Once you have those main supplies, what you're going to need to do is prepare the blades on any of these knives that you use. They don't really come ready to whittle. Any of them, the pocket knives or you could, but you're going to notice a difference once you do it. Once you prepare the blades, and that's going to require basically a little sharpening, which is a good exercise to get into because you're going to need to learn the skill of sharpening and honing knives. That's going to be something that is going to be essential if you decide to take the hobby up. What I would recommend, another cheap way to do it, is to find yourself some sandpaper. This is wet dry sandpaper. We have about 2,000 grit. You probably don't need to go that fine. You can probably get away with even 1,200. I think this is a sheet of 600 wet dry sandpaper, and this is just a basic sheet of 220. I would start with the 220. What I would do is find a decent piece of something you can mount the sandpaper on, a flat piece of plywood maybe. You could use that if you have maybe an old countertop piece, a piece of tile, something that's firm, and you can set the blade. You can set the sandpaper on. Some people just use a little spray glue to attach it. You know, you can or cannot, or excuse me, you can or don't have to necessarily do that. What you're going to want to do is essentially get. I'm going to use something a little bit thicker so I can do it in the camera here. This is just a piece of plywood. You're going to basically get the paper on there. Once you get your blade in there, you're going to want to go back and forth on the blade like this. You're just going to keep doing this on one side, turn it, do it on the other side, back and forth. Eventually, you'll notice a burr will form. It's a little piece of metal that you're basically creating as you sharpen this blade. You're going to want to take down the bevel that's comes on these blades. The bevel on there is too steep for whittling. You're going to want to try to flatten that out as much. That's going to be kind of key here. So work it back and forth. Take your time on each side. It doesn't take much. Start with the rougher sandpaper. This is the 220. Do that. Get the burr to form on there. Again, trying to flatten the bevel out as much as possible. You can do that with the Stanley. You can do it with the Swiss Army knife. Don't use the large blade. Pull out the smaller blade. Same thing. Put it flat on there. You're going to have to tilt it a little bit because of the bevel and start working it back and forth. Flip it around, back and forth. Get that burr to form. You'll feel it with your finger. You can feel a little piece of wire metal on there. It's a really thin piece. Just keep working it. It'll show up. Once you get that, move to the finer sandpaper. In this case, it's 600. Go through the whole process again, back and forth, back and forth. Another burr will form. It'll be a little bit finer. You're going to want to see that burr across the entire edge of the blade. That's key. If it's just forming on one end, you're not holding the knife flat to the grinding surface. Once you get through the 600, go up to your finest grit. In this case, again, this was 2000. It could be 1200 or so. Same thing. Go through that process once again. Get that burr to form. You'll feel it across the entire blade. Once you have all that done, then you're going to want to go to the leather strop. With a leather strop, just find a piece of wood that'll fit your piece that will fit your leather. You know, cut your leather to fit the piece of wood, whatever the case may be, and you can probably pick up some honing compound in some of the stores. That might be the one thing that's a little more difficult to come by. I use basically the green honing compound, sometimes the white, there's yellow, there's all different kinds of honing compounds. The key is to apply that to the leather. You're going to want to use these, smooth sides of the leather. It's not the leather that's honing the blade. The leather is basically just a surface to hold the honing compound. You could realistically do it on a piece of wood if you also chose. You could just rub some honing compound on a piece of wood and hone your knives that way. Once you get the honing compound on there, you can see mine's fairly dark. The darkness is basically metal that comes off the blade as you hone it. You're going to want to go in one direction. Where the initial sharpening, you could go in both directions. This, you're going to want to go in one direction. Just take your time, apply a little pressure, keep the blade flat as much as possible. Don't roll the blade. It's going to dull the edge of the knife. What you're trying to do is get rid of all the burr that's on there and finish the sharpening process. You're going to have to run it on one side. Start with 20 or 30 strokes on one side, flip it, 20 or 30 strokes on the other side, flip it back, and keep doing that. It's the more you hone, the better. You can't over hone a knife. I guess you could in terms of just pure boredom, but you're always going to want to come back to this. Once you've gotten your knife sharpened anyway, the honing process is going to be your primary thing. You're not going to have to go back to the sharpening over and over again. You'll just be able to go to your leather strop and hone your knife back and strop your knife back and forth on each side. You're going to want to get it to carving sharp, and you'll know the difference if you test your knife that hasn't been sharpened and honed. You'll see that it doesn't really cut. It basically it's good for opening boxes and stuff like that, but it's not really suited for carving wood. In that case, that's why you need to hone or sharpen and hone the knives that you're using if you're going this method. And basically that's it. You're going to want to get it to a point where the knife itself is sharp enough to test it on a piece of wood. Just run it down there. If it cuts fairly smooth, especially if you want to go across the end grain a bit like this, if you're not getting a lot of tears and it's coming off pretty easy, that's ready to go. If you were to take, and I believe the large blade on here is just as it comes. I don't know that I might have sharpened this one up a bit, but it won't cut. Well, in this case, I probably did sharpen it up. It won't cut as nicely as the hone blade. It'll basically dig and scratch and leave surface scarring on your wood, and you don't really want to do that. Obviously, and it's more dangerous, to be honest with you. A sharp blade is actually less dangerous because it cuts the wood. You're not forcing it through. It actually does the work for you. So that's basically gets you ready to go. Now, the other option, of course, and you won't be able to get started sharp whittling today, but is to go out and buy yourself a dedicated whittling carving knife, whatever you want to call them. Again, you've seen plenty of videos where I've used these knives here. These are my favorite knives from North Bay Forge. You can look them up online. These knives I found over the years to be some of the best, bar none, whittling knives. They're durable. They seem to hold up for much better. I've never had a problem with them breaking, snapping, crack. They just are really incredible knives. They do a great job. The folks at North Bay Forge. Can't recommend them enough. And they're good knives. I would recommend you check those out if you decide to go with a dedicated whittling knife. Another option is something like the Mora knife. These are decent knives. The blades are laminated. I believe, I think this is a laminated blade. I'm not 100% sure. But basically again, when I get these, I find that you have to sharpen these up to get to flatten out the bevel a little bit. And when I talk about flattening the bevel, think of it this way. Here's the angle. If you were to take a profile of the blade, here's the bevel that's on there already. This is the cutting. This is this part of the blade, right at the edge there. So this is the bevel it forms, and this portion here would be the balance of your blade. What you're trying to do is flatten that bevel. You're trying to bring it in essentially like that, where the bevel is as flat as possible. Obviously within reason, because you can't get it paper thin because it'll just snap. But you want to flatten that bevel. You don't want a sharp bevel when you're whittling. Again, that's fine for cutting boxes and stuff like that, but does not work for whittling. You want to bring that bevel down. So that's what, when you hear people say about flattening the bevel, that's what they're referring to. So that's some of your options. You can go with something like that. Again, I believe these are the old, this is a Shipley knife. I kind of modified the handle. I tend to modify the handles a bit just to make it more comfortable to hold. I think these are no longer called Shipley. They're OTC or OCT, something of that nature. Great knives as well. Really, really good knives. A lot of people use them, and they're well made. They cut great, and they're you know, the advantage of using like a North Bay Forge or Shipley knife OTC is that they come ready to go. You literally will take it out of the container it comes in, and it is ready to start whittling. They come super sharp, so you don't have to go through the initial process of sharpening and then honing the knife. You will eventually you'll bring these after whittling for a while. You'll notice they don't cut quite as well. You're gonna go to the strop and start honing the knife up again and stropping it and keeping it sharp to whittle. So essentially, that'll get you started. But again, if you're interested in trying it out, like in a really quick way, go buy yourself a Stanley or a relatively inexpensive pocket knife. I like using these because they're kind of fun, and the Stanley is surprisingly a good knife to whittle with. There's some people out there that use strictly this, and they do amazing work. So they probably have online videos you can see it being used, and I've done a few on there as well. Basically, that'll get you to the point of being ready to whittle. Next thing you're going to do is basically learn your cuts. Essentially, you're going to be dealing with just the push cut where you're pushing wood and it's coming off like that. That's going to be one of your primary cuts. The next one is going to be the stop cut, where you're going to basically cut into the wood and then cut up to it. So you're going to basically create a notch in the wood. Another cut that I find, a series of cuts that I find, is basically like a chip cut, where you're going to put the edge of the blade in the wood like that. Maybe go, over there as well, putting the edge in, and then basically taking that chip out. That's going to be something you're going to find very common. What I would do is find yourself or get yourself a piece of the cheap wood like this and go at it, and then work on just doing little heads or tiny figures. You can play around. You can these are just me messing around, not really having any plan, just kind of seeing where they go. You're going to find that, again, your push cut's going to be like this under the nose and on the top of the nose where the eyes come in. Your chip cut's going to be when you're pushing the nose back. You're going to if you watch some of my videos, you see me. I'll go in under the nose, and then I'll cut up to it after I make it's like basically 3 cuts. You're going to go here, and then take the chip out. That's a very common cut. I use that quite a bit in the ears as well. That chip cut, go in the wood, and then cut up to it and take it out. I've done plenty of videos. I'm not going to bore everybody with a vid on how to whittle video in terms of the actual process. I've done a lot of videos like that. You can certainly check those out if you choose, or a lot of other great whittlers out there have videos as well, and that they can get you started. But anyway, those are the essentials for getting started whittling. It's a fairly easy, inexpensive hobby to get into. And that's basically all I wanted to say. If anybody has any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond as quickly as possible. And I appreciate everybody who watches and subscribes to the channel. It's been a pleasure doing these videos, and I hope that people find some of the information useful. Alrighty, take care.